All right. Well, first off, I want to thank everyone for joining this call to cover Gong. I doubt it'll take the whole hour, but if y'all have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat as we're going through, and I'll also pause through each section for feedback or any questions. So I'm going to share my screen real quick. All right, cool. And a couple things I want to note just before we get started here. I noticed when I went through the Gong settings that there were different people that had different consent notifications being sent to clients. What that consent notification is like letting them know that they're being recorded. Right now, we have two options that we use. One is a pre-call email, which just gets sent to them 10 minutes before the call as a reminder, letting them know that they have a call coming up and that it is being recorded. In that email, there's a button that says, I do not consent to being recorded. If they click that button, it's going to automatically take the Gong recorder out of it. The other option is the audio prompt for when you get on the call that says this call is being recorded for note-taking and training purposes. What I have done for everyone except for the national sales directors is I've moved it to the pre-call email. Reason for that is I think, one, it's a good reminder to let them know, hey, we have a call coming up. But then also sometimes I feel like that audio prompt can throw people off. It kind of gives them like the big brother feeling. So I moved everyone over to the pre-call email. Amber, I'm going to get with you, Wendy, and Danielle to see if you guys want that changed as well. So I wanted to start with that. And then next, I have my inbox up, which is always a bad idea. But I wanted to do that just so that I can show you guys how to log into Gong directly from your Gmail. And you'll do that the same way you do Salesforce. So up in the top right, you have your Google Apps launcher. If you click that, you'll see all your Google apps. And then if you scroll down, similarly to how you find Salesforce, there's also a button for Gong there. If you click that, it's going to go ahead and launch Gong for you. And I'm going to save the whole like what is Gong because everyone's already using it at this point. So I think everyone is familiar with what the purpose of Gong is. It records all of the calls and it makes transcripts of them as well so that we can share these across the team if you want to tag anyone in any of those. But there's a lot more functionality than just having the call be recorded for recording's sake. So that's what I wanted to cover here is how you can use Gong to tag other team members, get them direct feedback from clients, and then also look at some insights that Gong is pulling from your calls, and it's going to provide some feedback on best practices. So once you launch Gong, you're going to land on your home screen. On your home screen, the first thing you're going to see are conversations. It's going to show you your calls, any calls of members on your team, every call for the company, and then listen later. That's just going to let you know any calls that you have coming up that are set to be recorded. So since I don't record any of my calls, since I'm not on with clients, I'm going to focus primarily on this companies tab. And then this just shows all of the calls that are being recorded across Fetch. And I want to click into a call here. Let's say I wanted to review this call with Pat, Haley, and Wendy had. A couple things to note in this view. When you click on a call, it's going to have this little thumbnail that lets you know who's on the call from the Fetch side, who's on the call from the client side, and then what account it is attached to. Over on the left-hand side, it's going to give you a very short call brief, as well as any next steps that were picked up from the call where someone has to follow up on things. So you can see that it read through the transcripts here, and it's showing all of these next steps that are listed. This can be helpful if you have one of those days at Fetch where you're just back-to-back-to-back calls And then you finally get out of that flurry and go, okay, let me review my calls and see if there are any next steps or action items that I owe the client so that I can follow up on those. You'll also notice every time I hover over next steps, you'll see the timestamp that occurs on the right-hand side. And so if I wanted to follow up on anything in particular, like this one says Haley's going to follow up with stats and training. If I click that 14-second, it's going to take me directly to that point in the call so I can listen to directly what was said by myself or the client to make sure nothing gets lost in translation or that you're not remembering correctly. So you have that option there to watch what was being shared. But on the right-hand side at the bottom, you also have this transcript option. That's going to give you everything in text so that, let's say you want to copy and paste something and send it to someone, you can do that, or you can just read exactly what the client was sending. That section is known as the call spotlight. So Gong's going to show you all the highlights in the beginning or at the first tab. Next is just going to be the outline, and it's going to bucket different topics that were talked about in the call. So here we can see there might be technical issues that have happened, resident complaints, usage from residents, CSAT, etc. So rather than you have to spend 15 minutes to watch this call, you can hop into the call and then use this spotlight feature to just see what did we talk about, what action items do I have, etc. Last thing I want to mention on this call spotlight is Mr. Big Brother AI in the room. Gong does have a GPT functionality similar to OpenAI, where you can ask the prompt to do something that you would like it to do. So like, let's just say I was like, write a follow-up email to Cody describing what we talked about. It's going to take a second to generate here, but this will give you an email outlining everything that was talked about in the call. I would highly suggest, and I want this to be clear, you don't just copy and paste this in the email without taking a look at the content. Also, this is a very long email, so you probably want to strip some things out of it. But this Ask Anything section is simply just like ChatGPT, if you will. So if you wanted to say, hey, describe this call in 100 words or less and hit enter, Gong is going to do that for you. So that's the call spotlight function. After that, we have, if you hover on the left, you'll see points of interest. This is also going to highlight and pick up on any keyword trackers. Keyword trackers are things that management has put into Gong to say, hey, I want you to listen for these specific things. So in here we have like cost, the monthly fee, rollouts, things like that. But up at the top, you'll see action items and questions. If I click on action items, it's going to show me 2 places in the call where we're supposed to follow up with an action item. So if you click on that, it's going to take you to that point in the call where Wendy says that she's going to send an email to the team, making sure that they have her information. So that's a way where Wendy can be like, boom, I have that action item to do. Let me make sure that I follow up on that. And then the time that Haley said that she was going to send stats to the team and do that monthly moving forward. So this is just another way to say, hey, without me watching this call again, what are those action items that I need to do so that those don't slip through the cracks? After action items, we have questions. You have ones that are asked by Fetch and then asked by the client. This is another great place where you can be like, what did Cody ask me to make sure that I got I answered it correctly or sufficiently. And that'll take you to that point in the call as well. So Cody here asked about, do we see a lot of pushback for residents when signing up on the front end? I can click the point in the call and I can see the text of what he asked and how we responded to it, or I could simply just watch the video back and listen to the audio. It really depends on just how you want to consume that content. So I want to pause there. Are there any questions, points of clarification on covering looking at a call and looking at that spotlight feature and how to just get to things quickly? No? Okay, cool. Sweet. Another thing, when you're looking at a call in Gong, at the bottom, it's going to break out every participant and where they were speaking and how long they were speaking for in the call. Across the whole Gong platform, anything that is said by an internal fetch team member is going to show up in purple. Anything said by an external participant is going to show up in this pinkish color here. So here we can see we kicked off the call. Haley and Wendy set the ground floor. And then Cody started talking here for quite some time. You all know when we get on calls with clients, like we don't want to feature spew. We don't want to take over the call and talk the entire time. We want to hear from the client what their concerns are or what they're looking to get out of us. And so how this can be very helpful is when you're reviewing calls, if you see a really long response from the customer, that's a really good indication that we asked a really good question that made them open up. So when you're looking at calls and reviewing them, you can see, oh, we said something here that made Cody talk for quite some time. I'm going to look at that in the call and see what did we ask? Like, what was the thing that got them to open up? And how do I make sure that I include that in future calls or something like that? Cool. So that's how you can look at a call, get action items, see what questions they asked. Another helpful thing is if we want to share this call with someone else, it might be within the sales team. It might be something that we want to send over to Anna's team. It might be important information as it relates to onboarding or like the client's expectations. Could be inverse as well, where Anna's team might be onboarding someone and something was said that's not clear or is not something that we can do. Anna's team can simply say, hey, I want to highlight this portion of the call and send that to the AE who said that to make sure we're doing best practices and we don't say that on sales pitches to set those ambiguous expectations. Or let's say you're on a call with a client and we have ops issues. And rather than you try to explain exactly what the issue is, you can share it directly with the ops director or like the OM. So in order to do that, what you can do is using this little scissors icon here, you can share part of this call. So let's say during this long talk that Cody had, he was explaining ops issues that were occurring. And I just want to send that one snippet to the ops director or someone on your team, whoever you want to share the information with. What you're going to want to do is you'll select that time point in the call and hit share internally. It's going to pop up a screen and it's going to allow you to share in a couple different ways. One is email. So you can just go in here. Let's say we wanted to send this to the OM in Atlanta. I can type in Jerry and it's going to email that portion of the call to that person for them to listen in and provide feedback on what the client was saying, or just an update to you if there was a problem going on that you weren't aware of. You can also type in a message here like, hey, Jerry, I didn't hear about this issue. Is this something that I should know about for all of the communities in Atlanta, et cetera, et cetera. So you can do that. We don't have Slack anymore, unfortunately, so we can't share in a Slack channel. But then the last option you have is, hey, I just want to copy the link to that short piece and then send it to them either in an email or via chat and say like, hey, can you listen to what the client said? You'll take that link that was just copied. If I came over here, when they open up that link, it's going to pop them to that exact portion of the call and start their listening at that time point. Let me go back here. So that's one way you can share internally. Another thing that we can do is we can also share this with customers as well. So let's say you were talking about an objection that they had, or you were covering how our best practices on how they're going to pass through the rate to their residents. Maybe you're talking to a regional, maybe you're talking to a property manager, and you want to share with the other. What you could do here is click share with others. And then you can get the link here and send it to them in that follow-up email, or you can send it via email directly, and they would just get an email with that snippet. So this would be good to, like, let's say you met with the regional, you talked about the pass-through, and then you wanted to loop in the property manager that might have been part of the sales process, but they weren't on that call, and just say like, hey, Susan, I met with Mike, the regional, and we talked about how like different pass-through strategies here. I just wanted to share that snippet with you directly so that you feel included on this and know how the regional wants to handle this. So just a really good way to create inclusion across the client side when it comes to deals and make people feel bought in. Will it be logged in Mixmax? Yeah, good question, Crystal. It won't be logged directly in Mixmax, but it will be logged to their record in Salesforce. So over in that activity panel, they'll see the email that was sent to the client. Cool. Awesome. So that's one way you can share, like via email, chat, like with a link or an email. The other way you can do this is, let's say, you know, you're working with your director and they want you to tag them when you think you handled an objection very well. Or maybe you didn't handle it well and you want feedback on, when I get this question again, how should I respond to this? One way you can do that is you can pick a time in the call. Like, let's say I want to do it here at this 4:30 mark. On the right-hand side, you'll see a comments pop out. You can click comment there. You'll see that it's tagged at that 4.5-minute mark. And let's just say I'm a national AE and I wanted to share something for feedback to John. What you can do is type in his name, John, here, and then just type out, hey, whatever the case is, I think I handled this objection well. I'd like to use this going forward. Can you just make sure that this is the right way for me to respond to this? You can do that, click post, and then he'll get an email notification letting him know that you've been tagged at this point in the call. It'll take him directly to that call, and then he can reply directly in this comment section, and you'll get an email letting you know that you've received feedback on that as well. Or you can talk about it on your one-on-ones, etc. So lots of ways here where we can share information that have happened on calls and make sure things don't get lost in translation. Any questions there on sharing? Okay. All right. Last thing on this call listening section is you have these 3 buttons at the top: add to listen later, add to library, or add to share call. This is just another place that there's a share button. So we already covered share call. Add to listen later, that allows it to just for you to put in a bank on your home screen of calls that you want to listen to later or go back and reference for whatever reason. And then add to library. We have not fully built this out yet. This is on John, Kendall, and myself to create. But what we want to do is create a foldering system of different best practices for maybe it's discovery calls, calls talking about pricing, objection handling, etc. Once we have those built out and you say, hey, this is a call I want to add to this library because I feel like this will be very helpful to people getting ramped up, any new hires that we have, we'll start to create that content library there as well. So that's where you'll just pick a folder that we might have, select it, and then it'll add that call to that folder. All right, so that's call recording. Next thing I want to cover are a different way to find recordings. And you'll do that by clicking on the conversations tab up here. And then this is just going to be a list of every single call that was recorded for the entire company. Right now, we have 736 calls recorded. Now, let's say you wanted to filter that by a participant. So that can either be internal or external. So I don't know why there would be too many that you want to listen to from internal people, unless you're looking for ways or just ideas on how to have discovery calls, etc. But what is nice here is since we can search for external participants, let's say you just booked a meeting with a regional and you want to get the context of like, have we been on a call with them before? Are they a champion? Are they a blocker? What reservations might they have had before? You can do that by searching that contact and see if we've recorded a call with them before. This is nice because you can see like, oh, we've talked to Jessica before. We know who's talked to them. And then once this spotlight generates over here, we can see what were some of the action items, just different things that were talked about so that you have context going into that call. You're not just blank slate. We don't have anything. You can listen to what she had to say about Fetch previously. So here you have that call brief, those next steps, etc. So I think it's really cool that, you know, we have the option without having to try to be an online sleuth or scroll through all of the activity in Salesforce to get context. Let's just see, have we talked to them before? And if we have, what were some objections that were brought up? You can do that for participants. We can also do that for accounts as well. So let's say we're talking to someone at ZRS. I can say, hey, show me all of the calls that we've had with this account so that I can see what is happening across the country with people that have talked to ZRS. And we'll have these call briefs under every single call so you can quickly gather what kind of conversations have we been having with them. You can see the title of the call as well. So if we have escalation calls, you know, hey, this account might not be in great standing right now. Maybe I'll be less salesy up front and more of a support person for them. And then you can also look by title. I don't think that's as helpful, but also in here, we can add different filters in here. So like if I wanted to come in here and say, show me anything where, oh, and I don't have it on this view. I'm going to bring in stage in here and we can say, hey, show me all of the calls related to deals that I have in contract sent. So I'll follow up with that, but I just wanted to show there's a way like we can add more filters than is just what is shown over here on the top left. These 5 here, we can add as many as we want to try to locate different calls to get account context or context on a participant or a prospect we're going to meet with. Any questions about looking up specific conversations? Okay.
Why did there's still no way to track like when you search a call, you can't search by the length that someone spoke, like as in like they led the call, like they spoke the most during a call.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't know if there is a way to do that. I don't think that there is a way to say, particularly, show me a call where a participant spoke for 5 minutes.
Okay.
But
Because
we can,
sometimes you'll look up a name and they were like invited to the call, but they didn't even talk the whole call, right? So if you're looking for an example of someone's call,
yeah.
like it can be a little hard to find. So I was just curious if there's any other way to search that.
Yeah, so it does look here like we have interaction during call and we have longest monologue. So if we apply that there, we can say like, hey, show me calls where someone spoke for, like a client spoke for a minimum of like this much time.
Okay. Because then we'll know like they most likely led the call or participated at least.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. It's helpful.
Mm-hmm. Cool. All right. The next tab I'm going to cover up at the top is going to be the deals tab. And this is just going to show your pipeline for either yourself, your team. You can select the scope of that by clicking in the top left. You can pick different people's teams, or you can select just yourself. So right now I have this for this call set to Kendall's team, and I can see all open deals. But along the top section, you'll see all of these tabs, and this is the number of deals in that stage. And then on the top right, we have a filter for timeline. So this is right now set to closing this month. So this would be a way for you to just see your deals on covering some of these columns. You'll see the first one is contacts. That's going to show you how many people are brought into that deal from the client side. Multi-threading or bringing in multiple people from the client side is always best practice. That's always a way to ensure the deal is going to move and progress forward. Because if we're just talking to one person on the client side, it's very likely that that deal is going to stall out at some point. So that's an indicator where, like if I go to contract sent, I want to make sure I have multiple people involved in that deal. Because if we just talk to one person and we're saying the contract is out, the chances that that gets closed, very slim. Next is activity. I'm going to skip over the warnings for now. Activity is going to show the last 3 weeks worth of activity that have happened related to that deal and contacts related to that deal. Similarly, when we were looking at the deal view, any fetch conversations activity is going to show up in purple, and any client side activity is going to show up in that pink color. And so this looks like a very healthy pipeline because we can see each deal has a lot of activity in the last 3 weeks. That would make sense because we're saying these deals are all set to close at the end of this month. There's only 2 days left, 1.5 at this point. Anything that is in gray is going to be activity that's happening on a different deal outside of that account or inside that account. After that, we have the next call column, which that's just going to let you know if you have a call scheduled, like a follow-up next step scheduled for that deal. So for all open deals, that doesn't matter too much. But when we're starting to talk about deals that are later on in the sales cycle stage, so negotiations, contract sent, we want to make sure that we have a next steps or a follow-up call on the books to make sure that they don't slip through the cracks. And so this will show you, hey, if we have something where the contract is sent, do we have something scheduled to make sure that things aren't going to fall through, or that we have a touch point? So that's an indicator that you need to go ahead and set something up if there's not something already on the calendar. And so that's primarily the deal board. I know John and Kendall are going to use this a lot in one-on-ones. So I think it would be a best practice before you get on your one-on-ones to make sure that you're looking at your deal board and saying, hey, is everything in the right stage? Do I have next steps added? If not, do I have an action plan to reach out to that client to make sure that we book next steps, etc. And one thing that's nice about this deal board is that you can make edits directly in here and they will push back to Salesforce and vice versa. So if you are reviewing this with John, Kendall, or just yourself, you can look at all of your deals that are in proposal sent and say, hey, actually this one with Francis, this is in proposal sent, but it's not going to close this month. So I'm going to go ahead and update this, choose a date, and then that's going to push that update over to Salesforce and update that opportunity for you. So this is just another mechanism outside of Salesforce directly where you can update your pipeline if needed. Any questions there on the deal board? Oh. Lively bunch today. Awesome. So next tab I want to cover is going to be coaching. Or sorry, I'm going to skip over coaching because John, Kendall, and I have to connect on that. Next thing I want to cover are going to be insights. This is some of that feedback from Gong on best practices that you'll want to follow. So I'm going to change my team. I'm going to go to John's team here. What this is going to show me is different stats on different topics of the call. How long do you talk for? How much are clients talking for? How long are we on calls for, etc. So this first sub tab on the left is going to be activity. This is just going to show for this time period, which on the right, top right, we have last 30 days. By hosts, how long are those calls on average? By team member. How much time are we spending on calls, call volume, etc. I think this first tab of activity, quite frankly, not that helpful, but it lets you know how long are different team members talking for. I think what is helpful are these next two tabs of interaction and responsiveness. So if you click on interaction, it's going to let you know here how long, what percentage of the call are you talking on versus is the client talking. So Gong's best practice here, it'll let you know 65% of calls or less, you should be talking. You want to make sure that the customer is opening up and they're talking. So this is going to let you know, hey, on your calls, are you talking too much? Are you not asking enough open-ended questions to get the client to speak? Next is going to be the longest monologue, which is how long are you talking for consistently? That's going to be, are you rambling too much, like myself on this call? Gong's recommendation is that using their AI, they say, hey, if you're talking for more than 2 minutes and 30 seconds without pausing and asking questions to the client or prospect, you're rambling on too much. You need to give them room to talk. So that is our monologue. The next is going to be longest customer story. And what that's saying is, how long are they opening up for? How long is your clients talking for? And Gong's best practice there is you want to have them talk about their pain points or what they're trying to solve for longer than 1 minute, because that means they're really like opening up and not just being short with you. So you can see here, like Austin has clients that are speaking for 2.5 minutes themselves. That means he's asking questions that are really getting them to open up about problems that they're having issues they're trying to solve for, etc. And I'm actually going to flip this over to Kendall's team just because there's more people currently using the feature. Next is going to be interactivity score, and that's going to judge how many times there's back and forth dialogue occurring in the call. And so that's going to be you asking a question and then them answering, or vice versa. And so best practices there are, we need to have 5 back and forth interactions per call, because if not, then we're just getting on and talking, or they're getting on and complaining or just talking over us. And so everyone that is recording thus far, hitting that best practice. There's lots of dialogue back and forth. Next is patience, which that is just like, how long are you pausing before someone responds to you? No one is hitting the best practice here. Gong is saying like, hey, you should take a second and pause before you get back. This is like the second that they're finishing, we're immediately jumping in. I'll let like John and Kendall will coach on a lot of these things. I just want to explain what these are. And then next is going to be the question rate, which is how many questions per hour essentially on calls are we asking? So Gong's recommendation is you have to, at least for every hour that you're on calls, be asking 18 questions or more. Everyone on the team is doing that. We're asking a lot of questions to try to get that client feedback. That's why the interactivity that we have is very strong. It's because we're getting them to open up. All right. Responsiveness here. This is regarding emails and how long is it taking us to respond to them. We don't primarily use Gong to track emails, so I'm going to skip over responsiveness for now. But this is just letting you know how quickly are we getting back to clients when they send us emails. Next, I want to cover is topics. And this is just saying for all of these topics, how often are we bringing them up and how long are we talking about them? So this will show like pricing as a topic. On average, the team's talking about pricing on calls for roughly 5 minutes. And then this will show you a breakdown of each person and how long they spend talking about pricing. A lot of the topics and tracking that will be John and Kendall's to do to make sure that we're falling into best practices, and they'll coach around that. But once again, just wanted to show you guys individual visibility here. And then after topics, we have trackers. Trackers are things that we set up in Gong to say, hey, whenever we're on a call, we want to make sure that we're touching on these different points and know on what percentage of calls are we bringing these things up. So the first one that's highlighted here is next steps. That's super important. If you're getting on with a client, you want to make sure before that call's over that the conversation just doesn't die, that we have next steps in place and we're talking about that level setting with the client. So this shows that on 82% of our calls, we're laying out next steps for the client. So that's strong. And then it's going to show you here for each team member, are they bringing them up and what percentage of calls are they bringing next steps up on? Cool. I'm going to skip over scorecards because that's something that we're going to roll out later. But what a scorecard is essentially like, let's say we have a discovery call. We're going to have certain things that we want to make sure we bring up. A scorecard is a way for your manager to provide feedback to you, or an NDS to say like, hey, you covered everything you needed to, or this is what we could work on. And then last thing is just going to be people that are using Gong for these coaching things or next steps. How often are people, or how many calls are people listening to? How many are they leaving feedback on? Things of that nature. And that's it. So any questions that I can cover that you might have, I'm all ears. Yeah, if you have issues with Gong, Sandra, just send them my way. I do know Kendall brought up to me, I believe it was a week, maybe two ago now, that some people were having delayed, like the call recording was coming late to the call, like after it's already started for 5 minutes. I sent our CSM that in an email, so she's looking into like, is that a technical side issue? But yeah, you can just send all of those my way for now. And I will say too, like Gong's a great feedback loop. It's also great to share internally. I'll leave it to John and Kendall to provide you best practices on what they want you to do. Like an example that Gong has shared with us, every week on a one-on-one, it'd be really good if you tag your manager in a place where you think you handled something really well, and then in a place where you think I could use some coaching on how do you want me to overcome this. And so that might be something that they want to implement. To answer your question directly, Wendy, for the Gong tracker, there's 2 times where a Gong tracker will not show up. One is going to be if there's no external participant on the call. I doubt that that's the case, but I just want to point that out. The other time is when we send out that pre-meeting email, letting them know that the meeting is going to be recorded. If they click, I do not consent to being recorded, the Gong tracker will not show up. So it could have been the case, Wendy, that they got that email and they clicked, I don't consent. And then therefore Gong's smart enough to say, I'm not going to have the tracker show up. Crystal, Gong does not leave the call if they don't show up. And I actually found that out this morning preparing for this call when I tried to find a call with Brooks and the client no showed. And so instead I just listened to him talk to them on the phone.
LOL.
Just so I'm explaining myself clearly, if I'm on a call and I don't admit fetch note taker and the client does not show up, what time does that time out? And it says that the note taker leaves the call after 10 minutes.
As long as you stay on the call, the note taker is going to stay on the call.
Mine have left a couple of times.
It did?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. I'll follow up with our CSM there, but then I'm interested to know if a client doesn't show up, is there any use case where we would still want the call to be recorded?
That's why I wait till they show up and then I admit everybody.
Okay. Sorry, can you say that one more time?
So I'll stay on the call by myself and I will keep the note taker in the waiting room. Once the client joins, I admit everybody. However, if I'm on the call for like 10 minutes, the note taker will leave.
Oh, you're saying if the client's late.
Essentially, or they just never show up.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's a good let me follow up on that. Write that down on a handy sticky note.
And I've only done this one other time where I was kind of in panic mode. For some reason, the fetch note taker didn't show up, or maybe it was going to show up later. So I freaked out. I went into Gong. I tried to merge the call I already had that no one was on yet and have Gong join it.
Okay.
So I was going to see if you could kind of show us what that looks like. I only did it one time because I was kind of.
Yeah. I would have to be, I don't know if I can show that in real time here. Let me see something really quick. Yeah, maybe when I get that answer back from our CSM, what I'll do is I'll do a vidyard recording of it so people can see how to add them. Okay. All right, let me check comments. Okay. All right. Well, ask any questions that you have now. If not, I'll give you all some time back. And if you come across anything later, just feel free to send it over. And if I think it pertains to everyone, then we'll just send an email out. And then we'll get this call recording set up on the YouTube channel as well. And then we'll send out that link. Awesome. Cool. Well, I appreciate the time, y'all. Y'all have a good rest of the day and end of the quarter.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank
Thanks, Ryan.
you.